What is up? GoodMicWork, back at you. What you're about to watch here is a re-upload. As most of you know, recently, the WWE went through and blocked about a dozen of my videos on YouTube. A lot of my older pay-per-view and DVD reviews, and a few other commentaries where I had used some video footage, with no audio, just me talking over it, but somehow it got matched or reported or whatever, and WWE blocked the videos. I tried to dispute them. They all came back denied. No big deal, whatever, right? I wasn't monetizing these videos back then because I was using a little bit of video footage. I assumed it was all protected under fair use, but YouTube guidelines and copyright laws are all fucked up. Me, ever the optimist, I'm always positive. I make the best out of a horrible situation, and I'm not even that freaked out. Most of these videos that got taken down were 2 to 3, and I think maybe even 4 years old in some cases. So they're very old, but at the same time, it disappointed a lot of you that said, oh, I like going back and watching some of those old DVD reviews or whatever. So what I decided to do is re-upload all of them, and I'm just going to sprinkle them out to you, maybe like one a week here in the next, several weeks, just to kind of slowly get them all back in. They're going to lose a ton of views. Most of these had, 50, 60, 70,000 views on them. So I'm not going to get those type of numbers, obviously, on these videos, but these are just a way to give them back to you so you guys have them. All of the issues that the previous video had with the video footage I've just taken out. I've put the new graphics up, give you guys a more updated intro, and remind you to visit my website, GoodMicWorkCommentaries.com, and follow me on Twitter at GoodMicWork, like my Facebook page, and like this video. This video is going to need it. Since this is a re-upload, it's very old. I could use all the likes I can get, share it, and just enjoy the old content from me. I will warn you that these commentaries were mostly done with a really crappy microphone with no pop filter, so this is not my best work. It's not quite as sharp. It was still a hobby for me back then, and my YouTube channel was still in its infancy, and plus my opinions. Who knows what I even said? The statute of limitations on my opinions are gone. Don't give me shit in the comments about anything you hear here. I don't even remember what I said, so if you disagree with something, who cares? I probably don't even feel that way anymore. So I apologize for the dated content and the quality being a little bit less, but I didn't want the videos to completely go away. I figured I would just re-upload them to you so you can continue to enjoy them, and I can replenish my pay-per-view and DVD review playlist down below on my channel. So sit back and relax and enjoy an old school re-upload.
I'm the coked-up personality, the coked-up personality, the coked-up personality.
CM Punk, best in the world. 2 reasons why I picked this one. Number 1, it's probably the most requested DVD review that I've gotten so far. I've had several people ask me to do this DVD since I started doing these reviews. And number 2 is I really miss CM Punk. As of recording this review, he's been gone from the WWE for about 7 months. His contract is just days away from officially expiring. And we all know the story now of how CM Punk left right after the Royal Rumble. I made my comments on it right after it happened, and we all have our opinions about it, but at the end of the day, I really, really miss CM Punk, and I think the fans do too, because to this day, every single Monday night on Raw, at some point during the show, the fans are screaming in unison, CM Punk. Now, on one hand, you can look at that and say, what the hell is the matter with these idiotic fans? They're chanting for a guy that doesn't want to be there and isn't on the show, and they need to pay attention to what is in front of them. But on the other hand, you can truly see just how huge CM Punk is. Even when he's sitting on his ass at home, the fans are still chanting his name. And I also strongly admire the personality of CM Punk. There's a couple guys in the wrestling business that I just truly admire as people for some of the things they do, away from wrestling. And 2 of those guys are Chris Jericho and CM Punk, which is probably why, they're 2 of the DVD reviews I have up here. I think if I was going to become a wrestler, I would want to travel a road somewhere in between the road that Punk and Jericho traveled. I like Jericho for, all the knowledge that he was able to absorb traveling worldwide for years and years and years, learning his craft, a true independent guy. I remember tape trading for Jericho's stuff before he ever came to the United States. He was already super polished and super capable before he ever even got to the WWE, and that is a dying breed. CM Punk and guys like Daniel Bryan are the last, of the guys that actually came close to traveling that road. But most of all, I admire him for his attitude towards pro wrestling. He loves wrestling, and he's going to work 100% for it. He's just a big wrestling fan, but at the same time, he is not going to take any shit from anybody, and I think that's why he's not in the WWE right now, because if things don't go his way, he is not intimidated by WWE management or other huge superstar wrestlers or Triple H or Vince McMahon or anything like that. He will tell anybody what he feels. And there are hardly any wrestlers like that, especially guys that have the guts to do that before he made it big. Once CM Punk, re-signed in 2011, the ball was in his court. He was able to say and do pretty much whatever he wanted. The WWE wanted to keep him. But CM Punk, I dare say, was even like that when he was younger and more inexperienced and hadn't even really made it big. He told several stories in the DVD about how he confronted Vince McMahon when he first came into the WWE more than once. And for a young guy to have the balls to do that, to put his career in jeopardy just to be able to voice what he believes, I strongly admire that. That's why I know I would not survive in the wrestling business, because I think not only would I be like CM Punk, I would probably be worse. I wouldn't be able to handle being talked down to or condescended to or lied to on a daily basis. I would probably not wind up knocking somebody the fuck out. So I have always been able to understand CM Punk's frustration, especially when he decided to leave the WWE this past January. It's very easy to say, oh, fuck CM Punk. He just walked out on the WWE and his fans. When the reality of the situation is, why would any of you want to be anywhere that made you miserable? You think there's no way for a top star to be miserable in the WWE? Well, clearly there is. There's enough misery there to make this person walk away from millions of dollars. When you're willing to do that, you gotta believe his level of frustration and CM Punk's inability to take any shit from anybody must have been unbelievably unbearable for him to walk away from so much money. So it's CM Punk's very strong personality and a strong character that I think I admire the most about him. I think he does take this overboard sometimes. Some fans have perceived him to be an asshole simply because he just doesn't feel like fucking signing any autographs or doing anything when he's traveling, or just doesn't want to be bothered at all. And there's two sides to that coin too. You can say, hey, all of these fans, that you're being so rude to, they're the reason why you have the money that you have the success that you have. They paid money to come out and see you. They buy your merchandise. The least you can do is acknowledge them and say hi and sign an autograph. But I think I would be a lot like CM Punk. I would not want to be bothered. Fucking marks are annoying. Just in my own little personal experience, my tiny little YouTube page with 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers on it, I have a few fans, granted that they are fans and they do enjoy my work, but they tend to take it a little bit overboard. They basically stalk me. And that's just on a microscopic level. Now times that by 1,000, and that's what CM Punk goes through in his daily life. Going to the airport, going out to eat, going to the grocery store, going anywhere. And CM Punk is just the type of guy that doesn't like that kind of attention. Some guys love it. Some guys love to be adored. Some guys will always stop and take pictures and smile and talk to the fans and humor them. CM Punk is not about to do that. And he reminds me a little bit of, some rock stars, although CM Punk, since he's straight edge, has his head screwed on a lot straighter. But, you think about a guy like Kurt Cobain, who always just hated his fame. And it really contributed to him, shooting himself in the head. And there's been a lot of people like that who, when they become very, very famous, it makes them really depressed. And I think CM Punk removing himself from wrestling for a little while was the best thing for him. I think it's great. He can obviously come back whenever he wants. The fans are still chanting his name to this day. And if I had to bet, I'm pretty sure we're going to see CM Punk again back in the WWE someday. He might just take a solid year off. He'll probably come back for WrestleMania or 31 or something like that, and whatever he decides to do, he has set himself up for a history-making return to wrestling. When CM Punk does in fact come back, whether they bring him back as a surprise or announce him or whatever, I think the potential storyline and ideas they could come up with to set up his return, especially if it was a big surprise, could, be one of the most memorable moments in the history of wrestling when that day does in fact happen. And he's married now. CM Punk recently got married to AJ Lee. This is surprising to me because CM Punk goes through a lot of girlfriends very quickly. I think during the production of this DVD, he was actually dating Lita, and here he is. He's already broken up with Lita, met AJ Lee, and now married her. He has had a lot of girlfriends. I'm surprised that he actually tied the knot this quickly into a relationship because CM Punk goes through lots of relationships. So I, for one, wish him nothing but the best, him and AJ, and I hope they are truly happy together, and I hope they stay together. And this might be something that CM Punk needs. This might be just what he needs to help settle him down, to help smooth him out. You have a woman in your life, the person that you're married to, she can kind of be the voice of reason sometimes, and maybe she can help CM Punk cope with his frustration and his stubbornness. And maybe actually his marriage to AJ might be, just what he needs to settle him down and get his head back into wanting to come back to the WWE. So with that being said, let's get into this DVD, because it really made me miss him. Just watching the WWE's great documentary. This is one of the best ones they've done. It ran almost 2 hours long. And it really did a good job of chronicling CM Punk's life. I mean, all their DVDs that they do like this are great, but this was just an exceptional documentary. I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed going back and watching it again, to help myself prepare for this review. They basically start right from the beginning. CM Punk grew up in Chicago. They talked a lot about his family life. He has some issues. CM Punk has some serious issues with his biological family. He has never gotten along with his mother. His father was an alcoholic and his brother stole from him. CM Punk's real life personality comes out right away in this DVD. He basically just talks about how he just basically told them to fuck off and he went and lived with his best friend. And I don't want to try to guess what goes on in CM Punk's head or CM Punk's family, and I don't want to just make assumptions, but it seems like he really holds grudges. I mean, he mentioned he hadn't talked to his brother in 12 years. Here it is, CM Punk's a multimillionaire, all these little things that happen, at the end of the day, you probably could sweep under the rug, but CM Punk, he's stubborn, he is true to his beliefs, and he just doesn't think that family members do that to one another, and he made his own family. And I can actually relate to CM Punk, some of the things in his life. I actually, too, have a female best friend. It was very strange for people back when we were younger, but to this day, she's the closest person in my life. I treat her like a sister. I consider her a sister. She stood next to me when I got married. She is married. We both have families. During this time of growing up with his friend's family, I guess CM Punk really adopted the punk rock lifestyle. Now, this is where the similarities between CM Punk and myself end, because I actually really don't know anything about this culture. But I do admire what it stands for as far as fuck you, don't look down to me, I don't have to do what society says, I can be my own person and find all these other like-minded people that feel the same way, and we don't need to fit in, we don't need to do what's trendy, we don't need to have, the name brand pair of shoes. CM Punk dressed like a dirtbag, he had a fucking mohawk, got tattoos all over himself, and he adopted the straight edge lifestyle. It's something I actually have to admire. When you're young like CM Punk, and when you seem to have not that much structure, he's left his family, he's estranged from his real mother and father, yes, he does live in a very good home with his best friend's family, but that's still not the normal, for kids. I think it would have been really easy for CM Punk to fall into drugs and alcohol. And when he tells the story of, his dad being late to pick him up from Little League and driving home in the van and throwing up every 2 seconds, and, little CM Punk as a little kid thought his dad was sick and he had cancer. And looking back on it, he realized that no, nothing was wrong with his dad. He was just a wasted fucking drunk mess, and he was completely hammered driving his son home, from a Little League game. He put himself and his son's life in danger and looked completely miserable doing it, and that was enough for CM Punk to say, you know what, I am never going to fucking touch alcohol. And for a young kid, because normally kids are so fucking stupid, for a young kid to make that decision, and be that responsible that he's not going to, if he's going to throw his life away, he's not going to throw it away using alcohol and drugs. And I think that's so amazing because young kids are so impressionable, and everybody's drinking and everybody is smoking. And for CM Punk to stay true to that at that age it had to be incredibly difficult. I'm by no means straight edge at all, but I'm definitely not a fucking alcoholic. I'm definitely not a drug addict. I believe that you can have your fun and be responsible and drink in moderation and have a good time and never let it be an issue in your life at all, which is what I've done. I do think that there's a medium. I don't think it has to be completely one way or the other. You have to be an alcoholic or you have to be completely straight edge totally. I do think there is an in-between point. There's a gray area that if you're a responsible, mature adult with a working brain, you should be able to handle drugs and alcohol in moderation. But at the end of the day, the decision that CM Punk made, whether I agree with it or not, I admire it because that just has to take an unbelievable amount of willpower. He then talks about when he first discovered pro wrestling and he really had trouble, nailing down an actual day, but one of the first memories he had was watching Roddy Piper smash Jimmy Snuka's head with the coconut. And he goes on to say that what attracted him to Piper was the fact that this guy was a trash talker, with a big fucking mouth. He went out there wearing a skirt. He didn't give a shit what anybody said. His main goal was to go out there and piss people off, which was a lot of what CM Punk was going through as a youth, with the lifestyle of the punk rock and all of that. He was very into pissing people off. And he said, he goes, here I see this guy on TV, going out there trash talking, pissing people off and making money doing it, and I was sold. He saw a lot of himself himself in Roddy Piper as far as Piper's attitude and the way he liked to light a fire under the fans' asses. And CM Punk enjoyed doing that in real life. A lot of that punk rock culture was to be as over the top as you can with your clothing, just to have people look at you or make fun of you or poke fun at you. You know, they're doing it purposely to piss you off. I think the higher the mohawk comes off the head, that's the more pissed off they are at society and people. You know, that's the way I look at it. And I think CM Punk saw a lot of himself in Piper, and Piper was the guy that made CM Punk say, I want to be a wrestler. I guess as CM Punk started to get into his late high school years, maybe even post-high school years, but still a teenager, he got into that backyard wrestling, and a few of his friends, you know, started what they called LWF, the Lunatic Wrestling Federation. They set up a ring, and it actually got really popular. This was probably during the time that backyard wrestling was popular. This was, I'm guessing, mid to late 90s, right in the middle of the Attitude Era. I remember news outlets doing documentaries on backyard wrestling and the phenomenon that it had become, you know, during that time, because wrestling was so hot, and now you had fans trying to imitate what they were seeing on Raw and Nitro in their backyard. And they started drawing for this thing. I mean, independent shows are pathetic. You know, I have a lot of friends that worked in independents and still do, you know, and some of them wrestle literally in front of 30 people. And CM Punk is claiming that this LWF was drawing 200, 300, and then eventually, you know, into the thousands of people. And that's pretty fucking amazing, you know, for just a little tiny wrestling federation that was thrown together by a bunch of moron kids. So wrestling was super hot back then, and CM Punk and his young band of backyard wrestlers were taking advantage of that. And they were actually making a name for themselves. And CM Punk was starting to, you know, he was starting to get recognized. You know, you heard about him in the wrestling hotlines and in the tape traders. You know, his name would pop up in a magazine here or there. So I remember hearing the name CM Punk in the late 90s just by what he was doing, you know, in the small neighborhood level. This, I think, is where, you know, the big problems with his brother happened. His brother apparently was involved in this, and he was in charge of the money. And when they started drawing significant crowds, I guess there was a pretty good chunk of money, you know, for a bunch of kids, that was a lot of money anyway, and the brother stole it. And in the DVD, CM Punk still seems pretty pissed off. He says, I haven't talked to him in 12 years, you know, your brothers don't steal from you. Your brother is supposed to support you and love you and be there for you, you know, and I want to tell him that he's exactly right, and I don't blame him at all for being pissed, but at the same time, people make mistakes. I'm not saying I would ever steal a couple $1,000s from my brother. I absolutely never would do that in a million years. Even at my most irresponsible time, I could never imagine stealing from anybody like that. But if I did, I would hope that I would be forgiven. And, you know, now it's karma. Karma's a bitch, because now CM Punk, if he's not talking to his brother, you know, CM Punk's got millions of dollars. He's very generous, and he does good with his money. You know, he buys his friends houses, you know, and he takes care of people and the people that he's close with, you know, and if the brother would have never had those issues, you know, maybe he'd be taking care of them. You know, I'm sure CM Punk's brother would love to have some of that money. I'm actually curious to know in real life, now that the DVD is a couple years old, if CM Punk has ever talked to his brother yet, or if they still have not spoken, or if there's any chance at all that the two of them will, you know, reconcile and eventually, you know, reunite. After the debacle with his brother in the LWF, CM Punk actually goes to get classically trained in wrestling. He went to a wrestling school run by Ace Steel, and he met Colt Cabana there. And the two of them immediately hit it off and became friends and became the standout of the group. You know, they were, you know, all those wrestling camps, you know, when you have schools like that, there's always at least one standout guy that's, you know, given the keys to the place, and he'll be a part-time trainer. You know, Punk and Cabana were the guys that were doing that. And they traveled all over the place working the independents. You know, the independents were almost dead by this point, but not quite yet. And the two of those guys were, you know, lighting the world on fire on the independent level, you know, and they were wrestling, you know, their match together all over the country. And it was around this time that CM Punk started developing his, you know, straight edge character. He gives credit in the documentary to his ex-girlfriend, who, you know, they were both a part of that straight edge lifestyle, and a lot of their beliefs and feelings are that we're better than you, and you're weak for needing drugs and alcohol, you know, and we have the strength to, you know, stand for what we believe in, and shit like that. And she was the one that said, hey, that makes a perfect bad guy. Get on the mic and tell him that you're better than them. And so CM Punk took his real-life lifestyle, you know, and just used a lot of that verbiage in a heelish manner, you know, and basically, you know, looked down on everybody and developed himself a hell of a character. He was great on the mic because, like he mentioned in the beginning of the DVD, how he first fell in love with Roddy Piper, that's what he was doing. He was getting on the mic and saying the absolute worst fucking thing to these people, and he was doing it well. And on top of that, he was already a good wrestler. CM Punk was working for a few of the promotions on the independents that were, you know, a little bit more blood and guts. the thumbtacks and the barbed wire and guys taking bumps on fucking mouse traps and shit like that. So he had gone through a few promotions like that, but he was always considered to be the wrestler. He even made reference to trying to have matches similar to that of Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko, and I think what he means by that was back in the blood and guts and violence days of ECW, you had those good wrestlers kind of pass through there that helped add credibility to the show, and they're not just known, you know, for a promotion where a guy jumps off a basketball hoop through 6 tables. They can also have good in-ring wrestling to help balance out the show, and that's what really helped ECW, and I think that's what CM Punk was trying to be, you know, to some of these independent companies that were so heavily relying on blood and violence. Now, that's not saying CM Punk can't do blood and guts and violence, because he certainly can. They talked about the series of matches he had with Chris Hero on the independent circuit as well, and the one in particular where I think they were trying to tear down some sort of a barn or some sort of venue that they used for their shows. Apparently it was a condemned building, or it was their last night there, and these two guys had like a great almost hour-long match where they literally tried to tear the fucking building down throughout the duration of the match. It was great, and based on that, they got booked everywhere, and CM Punk ended up working with Chris Hero a lot like he worked with Colt Cabana, and just traveling all over the country doing the independent shows. So CM Punk really started making a name for himself on the independent circuit. It's interesting, a lot of the people that they interviewed in this DVD, they had guys like, I think the lead singer of Rancid, Lars Fredriksson. Lita was interviewed for this thing, which at the time, I think she might have been his girlfriend at the time of this filming of the DVD. They had his ex-girlfriend in there, they had all of his family members and his best friend, they had Justin Roberts, Daniel Bryan, The Miz, and also Joey Mercury. And he talks about how he first met CM Punk and he was a smug, arrogant asshole. And I can see that, you know, CM Punk, you know, he definitely does not lack any confidence, and even though I admire his strong personality, I'll admit that I'm sure he takes it overboard too much, and I'm sure maybe back in the day, he rubbed people the wrong way, or he didn't, you know, conform to the proper locker room etiquette. I can completely see that happening, and I think CM Punk was, you know, a little bit full of himself on the independent circuit. He probably was, you know, because he was a huge star on that level. But CM Punk, nonetheless, was still making a hell of a name for himself. Now, this was right at the tail end of my tape trading. I stopped trading for tapes around 2001, 2002-ish, so I was not too familiar with CM Punk other than what I read in the dirt sheets and what I read in magazines. But I did know enough about him to know that he was a pretty big star and that I probably would see him in the WWE one day, but not before he headed over to Ring of Honor. Now, this is something very interesting in this DVD. I love that not only did they acknowledge Ring of Honor, they were showing footage of Ring of Honor, while at the same time they didn't even mention TNA. That's pretty funny. I think it's really cool of the WWE, and CM Punk probably, you know, really pushed for this hard if they're going to tell the story of his life and his career. You know, he has a lot of fond memories. He really got on the map in Ring of Honor, and he wanted them to include Ring of Honor in the documentary, and I'm sure Ring of Honor had no problem with that. They were probably like, fuck yeah, WWE, put as much of our footage as you want in your DVDs. Hell yeah. So it was a win-win on both sides, and it was cool. They actually filmed CM Punk in the Ring of Honor gym, you know, where he talked about his memories and his matches there. They got a lot into Ring of Honor. They talked a lot about his first feuds there with Raven and the great series of matches he had with Samoa Joe, and showed a lot of footage of each. And they also talk about the awesome final program that he worked in Ring of Honor. I'll tell you, that's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. I mean, when CM Punk won the WWE title at Money in the Bank and left the company with it, you know, that was just a spin-off of this Ring of Honor shit. This was great. That's the cool thing about some of these independent companies, is sometimes they can pull off great moments like this better than the WWE when they have a whole team of staff of dozens of fucking writers, you know, that each take their turn tweaking the storyline idea and then end up fucking the whole thing up. This was so good and so basic. After CM Punk had spent a couple of years in Ring of Honor, I guess he finally did end up signing a developmental contract after a tryout match with the WWE, and was going to leave Ring of Honor. Now, by this time, the internet was in full swing. So Punk tells the story that, you know, he went to Gabe Sapolsky and says, hey, you know, they're going to know I'm leaving, so why don't we do a storyline and fuck with them? And he took great pride in the fact that in the age of the internet, in the age, because we had already fully kicked in, by 2005, you know, the fans were already nuts. Everybody fucking knows everything now, and they're in everybody else's business, and you've got a whole bunch of fucking know-it-all internet fans out there. So they all know CM Punk has signed a developmental deal. They all know he's leaving. So they all come out to view what they think is going to be his last match. And these fans love to have these type of moments. They loved, it's almost like a recreation of ECW. When guys like Eddie Guerrero or Chris Jericho Jericho or Dean Malenko or anybody like that left the company, you know, they had one final match and it was a big kind of tear fest and the fans were clapping, please don't go, we love you, one more match, whatever the fuck. So they all showed up to the building that night expecting to have that moment with CM Punk, and instead of losing his final match, he actually wins the Ring of Honor title. And I'm not very good at my Ring of Honor history. I'm not sure who he beat for it that night. I want to say it is Austin Aries. You can correct me if I'm wrong. He ends up winning the title, and the fans are like, holy shit, I thought he was leaving. You know, wow, that's really cool of Ring of Honor to give him the title on his way out the door. And then he gets on the microphone, and he fucking heels on him. Just like Brian Pillman swerved all the fans when he showed up in ECW, and the fans went ape shit, and they're chanting for him, and then he gets on the mic, and he goes heel. And CM Punk gets on the mic and says, you dumb fuckers fell for it. Here you thought I was leaving. You thought you knew everything. This is going to be my last match. I'm taking off to WWE. You pathetic pieces of shit fell for it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm the Ring of Honor champion, and when I do go to the WWE, I'm going to take this title with me. And I think what they ended up doing is CM Punk was teasing on TV for the next couple of weeks that he was going to go to WWE with the Ring of Honor title, and I think they showed the footage where he signed his contract on the belt. I mean, that is fucking hilarious. I was not aware of this storyline until a couple of years later because I had already stopped really following independent wrestling. There was a time when I was really into it. During my tape trader days, I knew everything about everybody. But by 2005, I was not paying attention to that at all. So even though I knew and heard the name CM Punk, I had no idea that shit was happening in Ring of Honor. That was great. And when I saw it a couple of years later, I always enjoyed it, and it was cool that they talk about it in the DVD. So I think CM Punk winds up losing the title, but then he comes back to do one more farewell match against, of course, his buddy Colt Cabana, who he's had, you know, countless amount of matches on the independent level with. Probably the last time these two guys are going to get in the ring. And then the fans and CM Punk get to have this moment that they were waiting for. Punk is a bawling mess in the ring. He is completely crying out loud. And he talked about in the DVD how he was really going to miss it there. I mean, he had a lot of great moments there. That's where he really got on the map. That's where he really became CM Punk. And if he ever did hit it big, he was going to have a lot to thank Ring of Honor for. And I think he knew that in his head that night, and he talked about how emotional it was. And then, of course, you know, he jobs on his way out the door. The fans get to say goodbye to him. They get to wind up having the moment that he swerved the fans out of a few weeks prior. And it was just a brilliantly done final program for Punk. I think it's probably one of the best ways to go out of a promotion that any guy has ever gone out. And even though it was done on a small level, Ring of Honor is a tiny wrestling company still to, you know, you felt magic during that, you know, that whole thing. And I thought that was just, it was just so well done. And it just showed what, you know, good ideas CM Punk really has. And I know it had to feel good for him to swerve the fans and to fool them. They didn't know shit. They completely fell for it. I know if I was watching that, I probably would have fell for it. When something big happens and you don't see it coming, that's when it's the best. And I think CM Punk and Ring of Honor pulled off a hell of an angle. So now we're about to enter CM Punk's WWE run. So I think this will be as good a time as any to go through a few of the extras and the matches that they included in this 3-disc set. Now, like I've mentioned in all of my DVD reviews, I actually don't collect Blu-rays. A lot of people ask me, why don't you collect Blu-rays? And the reason for that is when it comes to wrestling DVDs and things like that, I rarely watch these things in an actual DVD player, and I really just want the footage. Now, I know with a lot of these Blu-ray WWE DVDs, I might be missing out on a few other bonus features, a few other extras that are not available in the regular DVD version, but for some reason, I just never got into collecting Blu-rays, and I really don't want to start now. So whenever I buy WWE DVDs, I just buy the original DVDs. They're a little bit cheaper too, and plus I like to collect DVDs, and it's much easier to find just basic DVDs than it is to find Blu-rays for really cheap. I've got 3 computers and 4 monitors all wired together in my office, and that's the main way I watch footage, and pretty much anything as it relates to wrestling, you know, is all right there. I rarely do it on big TVs or DVD players. So hopefully I'm not missing out on too much by not owning the Blu-ray version, but as far as the regular DVD version goes, on disc 1, the extras, other than the documentary, just include a lot of random stories, including things like what CM stands for in CM Punk. And they had a lot of his family members being interviewed for that. They were kind of giving him shit and poking fun at him, but basically it means chick magnet. It was one of his early personas or early gimmicks or tag teams or something like that, and that's what CM Punk actually originally stood for. They've tried later to morph it into Chicago Made, which I think works fine, but really, we all know that it really means chick magnet, and that's kind of fucking lame. They also had a story of when he fractured his skull, really gnarly injury. I had no idea about that. They talked about a great opponent that he had in OVW, Brent Albright, Bright and their program and the great chemistry that they had. They did a segment on WrestleMania 22 where CM Punk was actually one of the gangsters hanging off of John Cena's car during his entrance, and John Cena and Triple H were both interviewed for the segment and talked a little bit about that. One of CM Punk's frustration stories, Paul Heyman is even interviewed for this one as well, and they talk about when CM Punk first came in and got a tremendous reaction at the Survivor Series in 2006, and then the next month Paul Heyman wanted him to win the ECW title in the Elimination Chamber, and WWE put the belt on Lashley instead, caused a big problem, and it was one of the many times that CM Punk confronted Vince McMahon with some sort of a grievance. There was also a segment where it just involved a lot of different people in his life, pro wrestlers, colleagues, friends, and their experiences meeting CM Punk for the first time. He also told a story why he always wears that same Cubs hat, and when one wears out, he just buys another one. It's just a little piece of home, so a little piece on his dirty old-looking Cubs hat that you always see him wearing. He told a really cool story of the night that he won the WWE title at Money in the Bank in Chicago and left the WWE with the belt. He said he ran right up through the stands, right out the front door into a car, and actually drove home in his fucking gear. And he says when he gets home, he goes straight to his kitchen to chug some water and opens up the refrigerator and plops the belt in there, and that's when he took the picture and tweeted it and everything. That was just great shit. And there was also a cool little Ferris Bueller story. One of my favorite movies of all time was filmed in Chicago, and CM Punk's high school had something to do with it, and he was telling a little story about Ferris Bueller. Very cool, just to give that great movie a shout-out in this DVD. And there were a couple of other stories of CM Punk, just being frustrated in the WWE. I think it's really cool how they let him pretty much say anything he wanted in this documentary. A lot of these extras, he's saying some things in there that you would think the WWE wouldn't want him to say. So that pretty much does it for Disc 1. As far as Disc 2 goes, it's just a bunch of matches. Now, the only thing I was disappointed about, there's nothing wrong with the matches they put on this DVD set. However, I think it would have been kind of cool to put something from CM Punk's independent days on here. Now, like I said, this is at the Blu-ray version. Maybe the Blu-ray has a match like this. But for as much as they talked about his work with Samoa Joe and Chris Hero and things like that, I'm surprised they didn't put any of those matches on here. And I also suck at Easter eggs, so if there's some sort of a hidden feature on either one of these DVDs, regular or Blu-ray, I have no fucking idea. But the listed matches on the DVDs, Disc 2 has a match from OVW between Brent Albright and CM Punk. That was from March 1st, 2006. His ECW debut was on here versus Justin Credible from August 1st, 2006. An ECW title match from September 4th, 2007. The Money in the Bank match from WrestleMania 24 that he won is also on this disc. Tag team title match Punk and Kofi Kingston versus Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase from October 27th, 2008. And a no disqualification match for the IC title between Punk and William Regal from Raw, January 19th, 2009. Disc 3 has the awesome TLC match from SummerSlam 2009 between CM Punk and Jeff Hardy. The hair match, which I believe was the one where CM Punk had to shave his head against Rey Mysterio from Over the Limit 2010. I think the stip in that was if Rey lost, he had to join the Straight Edge Society, and if Punk lost, he had to shave his head. The awesome Money in the Bank match that I just talked about from 2011 against John Cena, of course, is on this disc as well. His successful title defense from WrestleMania 28 against Chris Jericho is on here, and CM Punk versus Daniel Bryan from Over the Limit 2012 for the WWE title is on here as well. So that's basically it for the matches and the extras on the DVD set. Like I said, of course, I know the Blu-ray might contain some things and there might be some Easter eggs that I'm leaving out, but that's the basics. There you go. Now we're on to CM Punk's WWE days, and of course, right off the bat, he wouldn't be CM Punk unless he was pissed off about something, and he's fucking furious about having to go to OVW, and he's got quite the chip on his shoulder. Paul Heyman and Michael Hayes both tell the story on the DVD that Punk was pretty pissed off that he was regulated to being a developmental guy. He felt that he was more than ready to be on the main roster, and this was kind of where CM Punk's personality really comes out. He probably did come across as a little bit arrogant or smug, or I don't need to be here, I'm already ready kind of thing. And he was getting a taste of how the WWE is right off the bat. From the minute he got there, he learned right away how they work and how they operate. And he says that he actually did a 180. During his time in OVW, even though he hated being there, he did meet Paul Heyman, and him and Paul Heyman hit it off right away. And Paul Heyman, from the very first day, claims that he saw potential in CM Punk. Now, there's all sorts of politics going on back then. This began CM Punk's frustration right in these early days. This stuff just kept building and building. He's been dealing with it for so long, you can't really blame him for walking out last January. But they all allude to the fact, which is pretty funny in the DVD, that Paul Heyman was really full of shit back in the day. When he was a promoter, he's sleazy, he's been known to lie and tap dance around things and bounce checks and shit like that. So Paul Heyman's not perfect. And of course, he's talking CM Punk up to the office. Hey, I got this great guy here. Why don't you take him up to the main roster and do something with him? Making him sound like he's going to be the next big thing. And of course, a lot of people in the office don't like Paul Heyman. They don't want to listen to him, and they don't believe anything that he says. So CM Punk, this all hurt CM Punk at first. It wasn't until they decided to relaunch ECW and they were going to put Paul Heyman in charge of that, and that's when CM Punk got his big break, because Paul Heyman said, fine, if you're not going to use him, let me use him, and he tried to structure the new ECW around CM Punk. But of course, it was a constant struggle with WWE management, even though it was ECW. I mean, that shit fell flat basically as soon as they relaunched it. Because it wasn't the same ECW, because it was still the WWE corporate machine in charge of it, and they were the ones that were going to make the ultimate decision. So Paul Heyman wanted CM Punk, WWE wanted other guys, and it became, a constant struggle, and it actually, I think, led to Paul Heyman leaving the WWE. That left CM Punk all by himself. Now, ironically, even though you hear the stories in the DVD of how WWE management didn't see the potential in CM Punk, they didn't think he was going to live up to the hype, that Paul Heyman was claiming. Even John Cena told a really interesting story. I mean, he was brutally honest. He said, this guy comes in with this reputation, this great reputation from the independents. You hear all of these stories. They get built up and built up and built up. And then when you finally see what everybody's talking about, you're not that impressed. And despite all of that, once Paul Heyman left, it seemed like CM Punk started getting his opportunities. He finally did win the ECW title. He was actually champion during the Chris Benoit murders, remember? He was actually supposed to face Benoit at the pay-per-view that he no-showed. And the WWE wanted guys like John Morrison. I think that's who the ECW champion was when CM Punk won it, and finally CM Punk was able to beat him and finally start to get rolling a little bit. And then at WrestleMania 24, they gave him the Money in the Bank briefcase. He won the Money in the Bank match at WrestleMania 24 in 2008. I even remember watching that thinking, wow, they're going to go with Punk, because at that time, winning the briefcase was a huge deal. The winner of that has been very successful. So when Punk won it, you had to think, wow, this guy's going to cash it in and win the title at some time. And then when he cashed it in and beat Edge for it, later that summer, they tell the story of how it really wasn't a big deal. He was the champion, but there were some big-time feuds going on at the time. I think maybe Jericho and Shawn Michaels, Batista, Cena, some other big things going on. So this was one of those periods of time where the world champion wasn't the feature match, wasn't the main event every single week. And you had two champions back then, so Punk was just the World Heavyweight title holder, and you still had the WWE title holder on another show. I don't even remember. I think Punk was on Raw at that time, but I really started losing track of how many times the WWE and World title flipped being the feature belt on whichever show. I always lost track of that. And there were more politics stories during this, too. A lot of people made mention to the fact that some people in the company, wrestlers and, management, didn't think that CM Punk was the guy. They thought he tarnished and diminished the title. I never thought that. I thought it was awesome that they gave it to CM Punk, because that was a shocking moment when he beat Edge. But for some reason, people were always just really reluctant to, put anything behind CM Punk in the WWE. The guy must have gone through hell. I mean, he's already a stubborn asshole as it is. Imagine, a stubborn asshole like that having to deal with these fucking douchebags in the WWE. God, I'd go out of my mind. And it seemed like you never knew what was in the WWE's head. One minute, they're giving him a huge moment, having him win the World Heavyweight title. The next minute, they're taking the belt off of him without him even having to wrestle. To this day, this one pisses me off. I remember when it happened, I'm like, what the fuck? That makes no fucking sense. But they did the angle where Randy Orton kicked CM Punk in the head backstage before his title defense, and then he wasn't able to come out and defend the title. And my memory and my history is hazy, but correct me if I'm wrong. Was this the pay-per-view that Jericho lost to Shawn Michaels and then came out and won the heavyweight title later on? If I'm not mistaken, I think that's what might have happened during that. But the bitch of it was that CM Punk Punk was no longer the champion and he never lost the belt. I think they could have figured out a way to keep him in the match, even if they wanted to run with the same storyline. They could have eliminated somebody else out of there, I don't know, but it was fucking retarded the way they decided to take the title off of CM Punk, and it pissed him off. They then briefly touch on some of the other things he did after he was World Heavyweight Champion. He won the tag team titles with Kofi Kingston. He won the Intercontinental title in a little feud with William Regal, which was actually really good. And then we're creeping up around WrestleMania 25 time, and it's another Money in the Bank match, and he's entered into that match, and guess what? He wins it again. Now, this is another one of those things that confuses me, because according to CM Punk in the documentary, you know, he's constantly being jerked around by the WWE, and you hear a lot of guys on the DVD like Michael Hayes, John Cena, and even a few others mention that, you know, the WWE never really saw the big deal in CM Punk and really never thought he was going to be a main star, yet they were still giving him opportunities. They were fucking him over 1 minute and they were massaging him the next minute. It seemed like the WWE couldn't make up their minds what they wanted to do with the guy, so now he wins the briefcase again at WrestleMania 25, and then finally he gets the opportunity to be a heel. He tells a story where there was a meeting in Vince McMahon's office with Michael Hayes where Vince says, "We want to allow you the opportunity to run as a heel, but I don't think you can do it." And CM Punk said he was fucking hugely insulted, and I can just see this. This is what would frustrate me too. You know, Vince McMahon is a genius. Nobody could have built the empire that he built, but there are things about wrestling that Vince McMahon is completely naive to. And the fact that he looks at a great heel like CM Punk, a guy that has proven that can get a ton of fucking heat when you put a microphone in his hand, he says to him, "I don't think you can be a good heel. I don't think you have what it takes. You need to prove me wrong. It's a challenge to you." CM Punk was dead fucking salted. And he said, "You gotta be fucking kidding me. Have you not seen anything I've ever done? Did you not see what I was doing in Ring of Honor and all of these other places?" You know, CM Punk was better on the mic than a lot of guys in the WWE before he even got to the WWE. And it's one of those things where Vince McMahon knows a lot about the WWE way of life, but he knows nothing about pro wrestling, you know, on a worldwide basis. He never did. You know, that's why WCW scooped up all those great cruiserweights. That's why they had Jericho and Benoit and Malenko and Guerrero. That's why they had those guys first. Because guys in WCW were aware of these wrestlers all over the world, where none of those idiots in WWE, guys like Gerald Briscoe and Kevin Dunn and Vince Russo and Vince McMahon, they didn't know what the fuck was going on out there. So it's kind of funny that Vince McMahon is sitting across the table from one of the best heels in the business and telling him, "I hope you can prove me wrong and be a good heel." Well, no fucking shit. And CM Punk was able to do this feud with Jeff Hardy when he cashed in the briefcase again, this time cashing it in as a heel. And then he was able to do all of his straight edge shit. He was able to rehash everything that he did, you know, in Ring of Honor and on the independent level when he was developing that straight edge heel character. He was able to do that on a big stage like the WWE, and he had the perfect opponent. He had a drug addicted opponent, a guy that had had all sorts of problems by this point. He had had numerous wellness policy violations. He'd been suspended a couple times, very close to being fired. And as soon as he left the WWE, he got in all that trouble where his house was raided, you know, and his life went down the shitter. It fucking his house burned down. His dog died. I mean, you know, Hardy was just a mess back then. And this created a perfect opponent for CM Punk, because when you talk about looking down on somebody and claiming that your straight-edge lifestyle is better than everybody else, Jeff Hardy is the perfect opponent. And I love that feud. You know, wrestling was hard for me to watch during this point. You know, I had really started to lose interest. This was about a year before I started doing commentaries, and I was just basically eyeballing the product. But I remember watching a good amount of this CM Punk-Jeff Hardy feud and how much I liked it and how much I really became a fan of CM Punk during this time. I always liked CM Punk, but this was the feud that made me say, "Oh, this guy's gold." He eventually had a loser leave town match with Jeff Hardy on SmackDown. I think that was a cage match, and that led to Jeff leaving the WWE, and a few months later he wound up in TNA. They talk a little bit about CM Punk's feud with The Undertaker in 2009 as well. I think he had 3 or 4 matches with The Undertaker. I know he lost the title to him in the Hell in the Cell that year, and Punk mentions that he was frustrated in that. Now, you know, I understand that CM Punk has to deal with some bullshit in the WWE, but this is one of those things where if I'm in his shoes and I'm wrestling The Undertaker in a 3 or 4 month program, I'm not complaining at all. If they want me to put The Undertaker over 2 or 3 times in a row, I would be more than happy to do that. So CM Punk made it sound like he was being jerked around again, but he was working a great program with The Undertaker. I think he did beat him one time in some bullshit decision in their first match, and then he lost the title in the Hell in the Cell, and then lost a couple rematch opportunities to him after that, I think. So, to me, this feud wasn't really a bad thing. I think they had some good matches. I think he earned The Undertaker's respect, and, I don't see personally what was so bad about his feud with The Undertaker, even though he lost the belt. They did a lot of in-between stuff, too, in this documentary, between talking about his career. They talked about a few other things, like, they mentioned how he had become a vegetarian and he had a lifestyle change, basically showed his diet and his workout regimen, things like that. Also showed his bus that he was able to travel around in, which is fucking awesome. A lot of guys do this now. I mean, that's just what's so funny. Back in the day, you didn't have these luxuries. These guys just had to drive these rental cars all over hell and gone. Now, if you're a big enough star, you can have your own private fucking house just driving down the road. I mean, it's unbelievable. And CM Punk really acknowledges that it's kind of an obnoxious and extravagant way to travel, but it's an investment on his sanity and his bullshit. If he's close enough to drive, he's going to drive. That way he doesn't have to deal with an airport. He doesn't have to deal with mobs of fans or getting his elbows and knees banged around, on airplanes and things like that. So it's just much more comfortable. And to me, I would love that. The fact that after a show, you can just get on your bus and lay down and watch TV and let your driver take you to wherever the hell you need to go. You can get a good night's sleep, the whole deal. So that's pretty cool. He also talked a lot about his tattoos and what they mean and all of that. And Joey Mercury also told the story of how CM Punk helped him buy his house when he ran into financial trouble. And I think CM Punk was instrumental in getting Joey Mercury a job back in the WWE when he joined the Straight Edge Society. And I don't know if he works backstage or whatnot, but, I think CM Punk, helped, facilitate that. They go into a lot of detail on the Straight Edge Society, too. Now, this was one of my favorite times. I had just started doing commentaries, I think, right around the time that CM Punk was doing the SES. And I thought it was the best work of his career. I absolutely loved the gimmick and what he was doing and, how well written it was. And CM Punk said he really sunk his teeth into that and had a lot of fun with it. And it had a great start. But eventually, like most great ideas in the WWE, it eventually just crumbles and falls completely apart. I think CM Punk was struggling with the creative team on, on promos and things like that, and he was trying to do a lot of it himself, and they were, too many guys were changing up the character and the idea. This, I think, is something that has happened to just about every feud and angle in the business, and a lot of times it's turned out to hurt that feud or angle, and the same thing happened with the Straight Edge Society. It eventually just kind of evaporated, and I think they could have done a lot more with it. CM Punk says the same thing in the DVD. God damn it, we could have gone so far with that thing. I think they could have, too. And for as much as the WWE does right, they do a whole hell of a lot of shit wrong. And this was one of those instances where, they could have done so much more with this. To me, the Straight Edge Society should have been at the level that the Wyatt family is on now, feuding with big-time names in major storylines on Monday Night Raw. They were primarily on SmackDown, and they had some really good work there and did some great things, but I think if they were on a bigger stage, and they had that bigger star to work with, Punk could have, just really gotten himself over as a heel. But whatever, you can't do anything about it now. But back then, it really pissed CM Punk off, and I think, some of the circumstances that went down in the Straight Edge Society is what led him to decide not to re-sign his contract in 2011. Now, we all remember this. I was on YouTube by this point. Had just started my commentaries about a year prior, and then CM Punk drops that fucking pipe bomb on Raw. Holy fucking shit, I remember it like it was yesterday. Now, here again, for all of the bullshit that CM Punk says he had to deal with in the WWE and all of the frustration and being jerked around constantly, and for how I mentioned that 1 minute the WWE doesn't give a shit about CM Punk and the next minute, they're giving him huge opportunities. This is one of those times where his contract is about to be up and they're going to give him a live microphone and said, go out there at the end of the show and say whatever the fuck you want. CM Punk fucking couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. To me, you have to wonder the backstage politics that led to this decision. To me, it was almost as if, hey, we really want this guy to re-sign his contract. As a sign of good faith, why don't we give him a live microphone and just let him say whatever the hell he wants? Maybe that will be enough to convince him to re-sign. So I think the WWE and Vince McMahon primarily, most likely, really wanted to play into CM Punk's hands. Let's let this guy do what he really wants to do. Let's let him take the lead in this final run with Cena, and let's give him the title in hopes that that's enough to convince him to re-sign if we can put him through this great program with Cena. Well, obviously it was. I think CM Punk had some meetings with Triple H and Vince McMahon back then and told him exactly what he wanted. And I think he really had his heart set on making a change. Now, when you look at it in retrospect, I don't know how much change he made because he wasn't even able to finish out this contract. He eventually got frustrated again and just walked the fuck out. But at the time, CM Punk was getting what he wanted. All he wanted was some respect. He felt insulted that The Miz was main eventing WrestleMania 27. He felt insulted that he was just thrown into a program with Randy Orton that he knew he was going to lose. And there was no way in hell he was going to re-sign with the WWE unless he was treated the way he felt he should be treated. And that's when they had probably one of my favorite wrestling matches of the modern era, where CM Punk, in his hometown of Chicago on his last night, gets in the ring with WWE champion John Cena, wins the title, runs through the crowd, leaves the WWE as champion, drives home to his house in his gear, throws the belt in the refrigerator, and tweets a pic of it. Fucking hilarious. And I think it's really cool the way he rehashed a lot of what he did on the independents several times in the WWE. CM Punk always knew who he was. He knew what he was capable of. And that was just an amazing moment. One of my favorite moments in the WWE. And that's pretty much where the story ends on the DVD. The story goes all the way through his re-signing with the WWE, and it pretty much ended there. I actually think this DVD was filmed before he had turned heel on The Rock in the summer that year when he was WWE champion. But CM Punk went on to do some great things after that as well. He had the great run with The Rock, even though he eventually lost. He had the great match with Taker at WrestleMania, even though he lost. But I think when Batista came back and Daniel Bryan started getting really over, I think CM Punk felt like he was being put on the back burner again and maybe jerked around a little bit too much. And he just didn't want to wait it out and stick out the rest of his contract. He just got pissed and fucking left. When you watch this documentary and this DVD, you can almost see all of this building to that. CM Punk spends most of the documentary airing his frustrations, talking about how frustrating it was just to be a WWE employee and just with all the shit you have to deal with. So you almost have to wonder how the WWE didn't see this coming and how none of us saw this coming. To me, given CM Punk's attitude and given his story, how he tells it in his run with the WWE, it seems to me that, him walking out is an inevitability. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the review, I hope married life, I hope him settling down with AJ is enough to maybe clear his head. I want him to take, I'm in no rush, by the way, to see CM Punk come back. I just want him to come back. If you ask me, CM Punk should stay home for even longer. I think CM Punk should take a minimum of 1 year off, possibly even 2. But I think maybe early next year, it would be fair to start talking about the CM Punk rumors again. But for the rest of this year, I want CM Punk to stay home. I want him to enjoy his newfound happiness and his new married life. And I want him just to, be happy, be alone, be at home, be away from the insanity of pro wrestling and the mobs of fans, and just basically reboot. Or decompress, as George Costanza would say. I think it's exactly what Punk needs to do, just like in 2005 and Ring of Honor when they had the Summer of Punk. 2014 can be the Summer of Punk. Hell, it can be the Year of Punk, where Punk can be put on the shelf and Phil Brooks can live his life for a solid year. And when he's ready to come back and he's ready to jump back into professional wrestling, I'm sure the WWE will be there waiting for him, and so will the fans. I know I will be. Just watching this DVD and this documentary again on CM Punk's life made me really appreciate his career, and it really made me miss him. And he's my kind of guy. I appreciate his attitude. I appreciate his determination. I appreciate his sense of humor. I think CM Punk's great, and when he eventually does return to professional wrestling, I will be one of the most excited ones to see him back. So thank you for sitting through another one of these. I really enjoy doing these reviews. It's just an opportunity for me to talk about wrestling stuff. And I think I do these more for myself than anything else because it's something that I actually really enjoy doing. This was a fun DVD to go back and look at, and it was really fun reliving the career of CM Punk. I've usually been alternating reviews, so my next one will be a pay-per-view review, most likely. I've had several requests, and I'll be making my final decision on which one to do this week and begin work on that. And hopefully I'll have the review up in no less than 2 weeks. Until then, keep an eye on my main channel for my normal weekly commentaries where I talk about everything current. And again, I really appreciate the support. Thanks for listening. Peace.